The creaking of the old wooden floorboards beneath my feet echoed through the musty air as I made my way up the stairs to my bedroom on the first floor of my grandparents' farm ranch. The pungent scent of aged flesh clung to the walls, a constant reminder of the fragility of life. My grandparents, who had taken me in after my parents' bitter departure, had graciously allowed me to stay with them, but at a fraction of the cost of renting an apartment. I had grown accustomed to the quiet rhythms of rural life, but the smell of decay lingered in every corner of this old house. As I drifted off to sleep, the giant painting of Jesus looming over my bed seemed to watch me with an unblinking gaze. I had grown used to the eerie feeling, but on this particular night, something felt off. The darkness outside seemed to seep into the room, and I felt a shiver run down my spine. It wasn't until my second week of living on the farm that the strange occurrences began. I had just returned from my job at the small corner store in town, the darkness gathering around me like a shroud. As I unlocked the front door, I was greeted by the sound of footsteps rustling through the crops. I tiptoed closer, trying not to make a sound, and that's when I saw him, a figure crawling through the rows of produce, as if trying to avoid detection. My heart racing, I retreated back inside, waking my grandfather with a gentle prod. He burst out of bed, rifle in hand, and stormed onto the porch, shouting a warning at the intruder. I followed close behind, my eyes scanning the darkness for any sign of movement. But when he opened the door, something unexpected happened. A figure, shrouded in shadows, darted forward, and my grandfather's leg was grabbed, sending him tumbling to the ground. I leapt into action, pinning the assailant to the ground, and my grandfather quickly regained his footing, grabbing his rifle and pointing it at the intruder. But just as we thought we had the situation under control, a second figure appeared, punching my grandfather in the nose and sending him crashing to the ground. As the two of us watched in horror, the intruders vanished into the night, leaving us shaken and confused. The sheriff arrived soon after, but by then, the culprits had long since fled the scene. My grandfather, still reeling from the attack, stormed off to disconnect the camera system monitoring the crops, determined to prevent any further incidents. Weeks passed, and the strange occurrences seemed to subside, but I knew that they wouldn't be the last. The memories of those dark nights lingered, haunting me like a specter. One fateful evening, as I returned home from a night out with my sister, brother-in-law, and their friends, I noticed a note on the door from my mom, instructing me to take out the garbage cans. As I crept through the darkness, the sound of voices drifted from the backyard. I peered over the fence, my heart racing, and saw two figures huddled around our patio table. Fear gripped me, and I hastened back inside to warn my mom. But before we could make a move, the intruders burst into our room, and we found ourselves trapped. I shoved my mom towards the window, and we both leapt onto the tiny ledge, dropping down to the grass below. We fled to our neighbor's house, our hearts pounding in our chests. 2 weeks later, the phone rang at 3 a.m., its incessant ringing piercing the darkness. My mom finally ripped the cord out of the modem, and we slept fitfully, our minds racing with the implications of the previous night's events. The next day, a text message arrived, taunting us with the phrase, "Why didn't you pick up?" and leaving us wondering what other horrors lay in store. As I lay in bed, the clock reading 1:15 a.m., I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching me, waiting for its next move. The creaking of the floorboards seemed to take on a sinister tone, and I knew that I was not alone in this old house. The darkness crept in, shrouding the streets of Cedar Beach in an eerie silence. My wife and I had spent the evening strolling along the wet sand, the only sound being the gentle lapping of the waves against the shore. But it was the silence that was unsettling, the feeling that we were being watched by unseen eyes. We didn't notice anything out of the ordinary at first, but as we turned to head back to our starting point, we noticed something peculiar. There were footprints, 2 sets, that didn't belong to us. They seemed to lead away from the wet sand, disappearing into the darkness of the dunes. My curiosity piqued. I pulled out my iPhone and activated the flashlight app. I scanned the area, my heart racing with anticipation. And then, I saw it, a tunnel, barely visible, disappearing into the darkness. I called out, asking if anyone was there, but there was no response. I told my wife to wait, and I made my way towards the tunnel, my footsteps echoing off the dunes. As I approached the entrance, I could see 2 hunched figures, their skin a medium dark complexion, flaky and wrinkled. They seemed to be watching me. I didn't know what to do, my heart racing with fear. I turned and ran back to my wife, my feet pounding the sand. We didn't stop until we reached the safety of our car. The next morning, I reported my sighting to the authorities, but they were skeptical. I was left feeling uneasy, wondering if I had really seen what I thought I had. But the memory of those creatures lingered, haunting me. As a night janitor at the local high school, I had grown accustomed to the silence of the empty hallways. But one night, while mopping the floor, I noticed something strange. The lights in one of the classrooms flickered on, and I could see someone walking towards the window. It was a man, his black hair streaked with gray, his face twisted into a grotesque grimace. He raised his hand, and I could feel a chill run down my spine. I pulled the blinds shut, trying to process what I had just seen. I fled the school, my heart racing with fear. The authorities were called, and I was told that the man had been seen wandering around the school, but never found. I was left with more questions than answers. As a house cleaner, I had once worked for a man named Jeffrey. He was a recluse, and his house was filled with strange and ominous objects. But it was the basement that held the greatest mystery. A sign on the door read, "Do not enter," but I couldn't resist the temptation. I found a small wooden box, locked with a key that I had found on Jeffrey's key ring. Inside, I discovered disturbing photographs, taken from every room in the house, including the bathroom. The final photo stood out, a colored image taken from outside a window, aimed directly at me. I left the house, never to return. But the memory of those photographs lingered, haunting me. As a young couple, my girlfriend and I had moved into a new house, one that seemed perfect on the surface. But it was the noises that came at night, strange creaks and groans, that made us feel uneasy. We tried to ignore them, but they only grew louder. One night, I decided to investigate, putting my ear against the wall to listen for the source of the sound. It was coming from inside the wall, a strange, muffled moaning. I went back to my wife, and we stayed up, waiting to see what would happen. The noises grew louder, and we could hear things being pushed around. And then, we heard a scream. It was my wife, pointing to her closet, which had been opened. A hidden door led down into the floor, and I could see a ladder leading down into the darkness. I took my machete and descended into the secret room, finding a table, chair, and small cot. And then, I saw him, a dirty-looking man, with crazed red eyes. He ran out of the room, and I chased after him, but he was gone. As I reflected on these events, I realized that there was something sinister lurking in the shadows, waiting to pounce. It was as if the world was full of hidden terrors, waiting to be uncovered. And I was left wondering, what other secrets lay hidden, waiting to be discovered.